Hi everyone. I wanted to make a video to talk about a few things, those being some overall feedback on the Phaedrus papers and some patterns I noticed, and then to talk about your second research paper for this course, and then finally to talk about the final exam and the readings on the Roman rhetoricians that you're doing. So this may be a little bit of a longer video. We'll see how it goes. We'll start with the Phaedrus papers, and the first thing to do there is to notice that I've given two layers of feedback. You should actually go into Canvas, open up the document that you submitted, and you'll see all kinds of margin notes and highlights and annotations. And I've looked at everything from MLA formatting to citation usage to overall paper formatting, works cited. I've looked at mechanics and style and organization and the use of evidence, direct textual evidence from the text we've read. And then I've looked at the content and the comprehension of the material itself. So, you can imagine I spent a lot of time doing this, about an hour on each paper. So I really hope you take the time then to read the feedback that I've provided. I've tried to help you think about how you can improve on your next paper, and then other papers in other classes as well. And that's probably the first thing I'll start out by saying is like, why MLA, and why do we care about this so much, and why perhaps have I docked points for MLA and all of that. And I think the most compelling thing to say about MLA is that if you end up wanting to publish your work like in a literary journal, you're probably going to have to format it in MLA formatting. So there's a really compelling use case right from the start. If not, most professional organizations, companies, businesses, if you go into marketing, communications, advertising, writing, editing, you're going to have to apply some kind of style guide. It might be Chicago or IEEE or something like that. Usually not MLA in a business environment, but nonetheless, you're going to have to learn how to apply a style guide. The other case for MLA is if you want to go on to graduate school, you better have this down rock solid. It's the standard by which we document the use of our sources, and it creates an interconnected network of academic sources so that readers can investigate the sources that you cite and create a kind of trail of information and in order to verify the claims that you're making. So it's really, really important. It's kind of the gold standard in the humanities, right? If you're in the sciences or soft sciences, you're more likely to use APA, but in almost every humanities field we use MLA. And so then that also channels out again into if you're going to be submitting your works to literary journals and publishing and so on, submitting manuscripts and things like that. Often they'll ask for MLA. Not everyone, not always, but it sure helps to learn how to use and apply a style guide. The second thing then there is like, okay, what if you're not very good at doing this? What if you haven't had a lot of practice doing this? That's okay, I understand that. But now is the time, in a 300 level college class. So you might have to take some time to figure this out, right? And the way to do that is manifold. There's many different ways to approach this. You could acquire some sources, like we use let me grab a copy here, actually. When I teach intro to academic writing, we use the Little Seagull handbook. So almost every University of Wisconsin Superior student has one of these, and it covers MLA, APA, etc. usage. So it's nice to have an actual physical manual so that you can reference all those little tiny details like in-text citation formatting, works cited page formatting, overall formatting, the running header, the informational header, how much space should you have above and below the title. Seems like really nitpicky stuff, but there are standards about how we do this. And so that's one idea is you could get, and these are relatively cheap, somewhere between 10 and 20 used, maybe a little cheaper, having a physical handbook. Another thing you can do is use our writing center on campus to set up an online appointment to get direct feedback even beyond what I've given you to learn how to apply MLA style guide. And then the third is you've probably seen I've provided some links in Canvas and also perhaps in the feedback of your paper to the Purdue Online Writing Lab, which is an online handbook, an online web resource that goes through a lot of the MLA formatting guidelines. And you might have to spend some time reading these and and learning how to apply them. In some cases, some papers were really far off from MLA, and you're going to have to spend a lot of time. Um, Not an extraordinary amount of time, but some time learning these standards. And then, most papers there were like a handful of smaller details, but those need to be sorted out because submissions editor is going to see that and say, okay, this writer doesn't know MLA, and it immediately kind of jades their it influences their perspective on the content of a paper. If you're submitting it somewhere, so spend some time MLA, ask me questions. Writing Center, or having a handbook, or using the Purdue OWL, or looking at my resources in Canvas. That's going to go a long way. Um, but over, more positively, I'd say that overall the Phaedrus papers were really good. I think you did, most of you did your due diligence in reading the text, providing textual evidence, working logically through your thinking, constructing a coherent paper with some kind of purpose statement or thesis statement, and then each paragraph has a topic sentence that then expounds upon a sub-detail of the thesis statement, and you grew it into a logically organized paper that explored one of the major themes of Phaedrus, and you spent the time reading the text to interpret the theme, and you found direct textual evidence to support your case of analysis that you were conducting upon the paper. So that's that's what we're looking for, and then stylize that all in MLA formatting. So I think overall they were really good, and you should be proud of going from, most of you never having read Plato or Aristotle or any of this stuff before, going from zero to writing a paper about Plato in 8 weeks is a really fine accomplishment. I think you should be proud of that, and most of them were very good. So that's, 2 thumbs up there. I'm happy with that. I'm proud of that. The next paper then is a little bit more open-ended, and some people really like that, and some people get a little bit lost. So let's talk about the second paper. You're going to be looking at choosing an object for your rhetorical analysis. I think I say choose an object from 2021, or choose a recent object or a recent phenomenon. What I mean by that is some kind of text. So, it could be a music video, it could be a bulletin board, it could be, or a billboard rather, it could be a web advertisement, it could be, native advertising that you see in Facebook. It's really quite open-ended in terms of what you want to choose as your subject of analysis. It should be something recent, though, something new. So some kind of textual object that you can analyze, visual, textual, digital object, or you can choose a phenomenon to analyze. And what I mean by that is, maybe something like a broader social cultural movement, maybe something like a viral campaign like, Black Lives Matter or something. What is the rhetoric around that particular phenomenon? And then can you zoom in on particular cases, to do a direct textual evidence of some instance of that phenomenon. And I think I provided a great example of that in Canvas, where we have the author doing a video essay exploring the phenomenon of cultural norms related to Christmas cards, which, you think is kind of a mundane thing. What kind of rhetoric does a Christmas card have? Well, watch that video essay. It turns out that there's actually quite a bit of what can we say, communicative information packed into these things that we might not normally think about. So then when you conduct your rhetorical analysis, you really think about a lot of things. Let's take a music video, for example. You can look at the editing. You could look at the usage of color and symbolism, fast cuts or, long scenes, what kind of zoomed in, close, the cinematography of it exposes the mechanics of the construction of the video, because those are mechanics that have been implemented to have a particular effect. Symbolism, color, imagery, metaphor. You can look at actually analyzing the lyrics of the music itself. Or, in my case, I've always been interested in what kind of rhetorical effect does sound have, right? So, what is the time signature, chord structure, the key it's in, the various rises and falls, and what kind of effect does that have upon an audience? And I'm just being really like surface level here. I'm just thinking really off the top of my head, surface level. Like, look at all those elements of a simple 3-minute music video that you could analyze rhetorically. You're trying to tease out how is the object or how is the text purposefully constructed in order to have a particular effect upon the audience. And what is that effect, and is it successful in doing so? That is, in a nutshell, that's rhetorical analysis. And then you should include some other sources, so doing some independent research using the library resources. There's the whole field of visual rhetoric and digital rhetoric to pull from, other rhetorical analyses, or you can go to the Williams texts. Some students like to use this rhetorical analysis kind of as a gateway to explore other things that they've been interested in the class. So, for example, look at say it's an analysis of the phenomenon of the Me Too movement, and then you drill down at your analysis on a particular tweet or something. And then you use that as a gateway to explore the absence of female voices throughout the history of rhetoric. Again, I'm just being kind of top level here, thinking along just kind of surface level, but that's a kind of way to approach this paper, is as a gateway to explore some of the ancient texts we've been reading. So that's all, ultimately up to you. Read the assignment description to see. I'm going to be looking for MLA again. I'm going to be looking for mechanics and structure, an appropriate style for an academic research paper. I'm going to be looking at proper documentation of sources and the use of in-text citations, overall formatting. I really want you to, on the second paper, I really want you to put some care and attention into the formatting, presentation, and construction of the paper itself, because it's really going to serve you very well into the future. You don't want to go through your college career and earn your bachelor's and never pick up how to format a manuscript, because when you go to publish your work, you need to be able to format your manuscripts appropriately per the guidelines of whatever the journal or editor wants at that particular publication. Good. So we talked about major feedback on the Phaedrus papers. I gave you a brief overview there of the second essay. And you can look at the rubric too. None of this is mysterious, right? There's a rubric in there that I'm following for grading, and there's particular things I'm looking for in the instructions. But we have those two things covered. So now let's talk about the final exam. And the final exam for the course, those questions are open already, so that when you're reading, these next few weeks here, these Roman rhetoricians, you can read them in the context of what are you going to have to write about in the exam, and there's no surprise there, because you'll see those final exam questions are going to ask you to use both evidence from ancient Greek thinkers as well as ancient Roman thinkers, as well as to consider the fundamental differences between their approaches to rhetoric. And there's really good content in the Williams textbook about that. You're going to have to read the primary sources, right? I mean, you can't write about Plato in your exam if you haven't read Plato. It's going to be hard to write about Aristotle in your exam response if you haven't read about Aristotle. And it's going to be hard to interpret the Roman rhetoricians if you don't read Aristotle and Plato, because they both draw from Aristotle and Plato really heavily, and they also have key differences. So you got to read these things for sure. But that being said, this gives you something to look for when you read like Cicero and Quintilian. They both deal with, Cicero, for example, in De Inventione, deals with a kind of technical prescription for rhetoric in the vein of Aristotle. That's interesting. But then in De Oratore, takes that more Platonic approach, harkens back to Plato a little bit in thinking about the relationship between philosophy and rhetoric, and provides some broader. Both Cicero and Quintilian think about pedagogy and rhetoric, and I love the discussion board post you did about, thinking about the education of an ancient Roman citizen. That was important to Quintilian. Okay, I don't want to give you too much guidance there. I want to see what you think about these things, but there's a whole chapter in Williams about that, the Latinization of rhetoric, the transition from, the Hellenistic period to the ancient Roman period and how they approach rhetoric differently. And then there's key differences in, the social, cultural, economic situations that these thinkers are writing in. As you can see, Cicero and Augustine have pretty violent endings to their lives, but then again, Plato was writing in the midst of the Peloponnesian War too. So, again, I don't want to get too much into it, but that's for you to tease out an answer to these questions. And they're not Googleable questions. You can't just go to Google and say, what is the relationship between rhetoric and truth in ancient Rome and ancient Greece? There's nothing there. These are like really fine-tuned particular questions that you're going to have to think about. And so in the final exam, I'm going to be looking for the use of direct textual evidence. You're going to have to refer to the text of an ancient Greek thinker and an ancient Roman thinker in each of the two questions that appear in the final exam. You're going to have to stylize it as an MLA essay, and you'll have to submit it by the deadline. Unfortunately, I won't have a lot of feedback for you. I have to grade those relatively quickly to get final grades in, but I do read them carefully. I'm looking for MLA formatting and documentation of sources. I'm looking for comprehension of the text. Did you understand what you read, or at least, put in a good effort to digest the main points? You could include some context from Williams. Williams has those really great high-level essays that introduce each of the thinkers. And I'm going to be looking for, your consideration and care of thinking about some of those social, cultural, political, historical backdrops in which all of these things are set. But again, there's instructions there for the final exam that you can read. I just wanted to give you like something to look out for, right? You should read those final exam questions in advance so that when you read Cicero, Quintilian, Horace, St. Augustine, you have those questions in mind to kind of frame the Roman rhetoricians so that you have some kind of framework to be thinking about as you move forward. Well, I think that's all I have for now. We talked about feedback on the Phaedrus papers. We talked about some context for your second research paper, and then I gave you some ideas to think about contextualizing your final exam responses with both the ancient Greek and the ancient Roman thinkers, which gives you something to look out for as you're reading these last few Roman rhetoricians. And then, of course, we have 2 weeks there where we're going to think about, we're going to fast forward from St. Augustine into modern American rhetoric, 20th century American rhetoric. We'll read Lloyd Bitzer there, and then we'll fast forward 1 century almost, a little bit further ahead into the present day and think about applications of rhetoric for the digital age. And of course, now is an extraordinary time to be studying rhetoric because of this phenomenon of disinformation and fake news and the propagation of information and disinformation and misinformation through various social media channels, as well as this new phenomenon of hyper-targeted advertising where messages can be sent directly at specific audiences, at specific demographics. You can develop a Facebook advertisement and send it to a particular segment of users that have a specific age, education level, income level, interests, and really get granular with the targeting. Not too different from Plato's idea of matching the soul of or the nature of the speech with the soul of the listener, right? It's kind of matching communication to the audience. It's an ancient idea, and with modern technology, we've kind of fine-tuned it, and we're missing a lot of the ethical ideas around it, which you'll see throughout ancient Greek and ancient Roman thinkers, is this, often this care to consider the negative effects of false persuasion, to think about deceit and lies and fake news, right, as it were. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Take care of yourselves. You're doing a good job in the course. I'm here if you need me. Send me an email. Send me a message. Work on your MLA if you need to. Seek help. Writing Center. Get a handbook. Read some of those resources online. Chat with me. And good luck with everything. Take care of yourselves.